The Swedish East India Company was in business between 1731 and 1813. The company had 37 ships, which undertook a total of 135 voyages to China. One of these ships was an East Indiaman called the Gotheborg. The aim of the voyages was to bring home tea, silk, spices, and porcelain. The currency used for this was Spanish silver, which was traded in Cadiz on the outward journey. A return trip to China normally took around 18 months. However, the East Indiaman Gotheborg's final voyage took 30 months. After a dramatic, adventurous journey home, plagued by delays, she finally sailed into Gothenburg Harbor on the 12th of September, 1745. But just 900 meters southwest of Elfborg's fortress, she sank, thankfully without loss of life. An excavation was carried out on the wreck of the East Indiaman Gotheborg between 1986 and 1993. The finds included 9 tons of broken china, among many other things. What was not found, however, was the ship's hull, as this had long since decayed and disintegrated, and only a few sections were left, buried in the muddy seabed. However, one product of the excavation was the idea of rebuilding a faithful replica of the old East Indiaman Gotheborg and taking her on an historic voyage to China. The new Swedish East India Company was formed in 1993, and in 1995 came the laying of the keel. The modern Gotheborg should be making her maiden voyage on the 7 seas 10 years after she started being built. Building a ship of this size requires enormous amounts of wood, over 4,000 cubic meters in all. The biggest trees are oak, with a diameter of around 1 meter and weighing some 10 tons. These trees come from central Sweden and southern Denmark and are around 200 years old. "75% of the hull is made of oak and 25% of pine. The ship's rib planks are made of laminated pine, each plank being 14 meters long. Adhesive is spread on each side of the plank and they are put together. With the help of 70 clamps, placed 20 centimeters apart, the rib planks are then bent into the right shape. The ribs are put together over the keel with a floor timber which keeps the two halves of the rib together. All in all, there are 66 ribs, each weighing approximately 2 tons. Pine tar is used on all joining surfaces, and supports are used to help fix the ribs properly. Once all the ribs and floor timber are in place, it's time to mount the prow, which is made up of 3 sections. The connection between the keel and the prow is spliced together using a half joint. The prow also needs supporting to keep it in place. A lot of forged iron is needed to hold all the wooden parts together. A number of tools are required, such as axes and sledgehammers for special purposes, and these are made on the construction site. All in all, around 20 tons of nails and bolts are needed to keep the wooden construction together. Here you can see some of the 56,000 nails that were needed for construction being made. The heaviest metal parts are the elbow joints, which fix the deck to the side of the hull. Each one weighs about 80 kilograms, and there are 250 of them in all. Every one of the 250 elbow joints has first been fitted to the hull. Following this, the elbow joints are forged to a perfect fit before they are mounted on board. But it is not only the hull that needs forged iron. Thousands of hooks, grommets, and iron mountings are also used for the rigging. Over 50 tons of steel have been forged for the ship. The enormous logs have to be sawn before they can be used as beams and planks. Here you can see the block saw we use at the shipyard. Once the timber has been sawn, it is laid out to dry before use. The hull is clad with planks on the inside. Here you can see an interior reinforcement called a bilge stringer, which is added where the hull bends up from the bottom to the side. The thickest planks are 16 centimeters thick. Attaching the thick planks calls for powerful clamps and hoists. The planks are pre-drilled before the nails are driven to prevent splitting. The rope used to maneuver sails and support masts is made from hemp fiber. The fibers should ideally be as long as possible. The thread is tarred to prevent the fibers and ropes from rotting. It's important to use just the right amount of tar. About 100,000 kilometers of hemp thread is cleaned and passed through the rigging before it is tarred and twined into rope. The various threads are twined into strands or rope cords. Twining into rope cords is done by hand to ensure exactly the right firmness in the twine. The strands are then twined together to make rope. The twining of all rope for the East Indiaman was done in collaboration with the historical rope makers' facility in Elvangen. Here, the well-known Danish expert in rope making, Ole Magnus, is seen at work. All rope will be produced under the supervision of Ole Magnus before the vessel leaves the dock. Once the rope has been twined, there is still a lot left to do. All kinds of stops and bindings, or servings, have to be put on the rope. Before the rope can be used, it also has to be stretched. Here, a finished shroud is carried out before it is fitted in the rigging. The shroud holds up the mast from the side. Here, two skilled riggers are tying a so-called stay knot, an important detail for the prow. Some 30 tons of rope will be used for the ship's rigging. The weakest is 10 millimeters thick, while the strongest is 90 millimeters. Around 1,000 blocks will be needed, from small single blocks to large halyard blocks. The blocks are made of elm and come in all different shapes and sizes. The block shells are made from a single piece, rather than several pieces joined together. The blocks are sawn out with a bandsaw and chainsaw, but are then shaped using hand tools. A hollow is made at the end of the block for the stop bolt that will eventually hold the block. Finally, the shells are impregnated with linseed oil. The ship will be decorated with various kinds of wood carving. For instance, symbols will be used instead of letters to write the ship's name. As she is called the Gothenburg, the ship will have the Gothenburg city arms on the stern. The ship will also be decorated with a figurehead and a company emblem. The ship also has an outer layer of planks. In order to shape the planks to follow the hull, they have to be moistened with steam. This involves placing them in a special chamber and leaving them for 4 to 6 hours while they are steamed at 100 degrees Celsius. They then have to be put in place within 15 to 20 minutes before they harden again and become more difficult to shape. The heaviest planks weigh half a ton. Here you can see an exterior reinforcement, called a wale, being fitted. The lower wale is around 15 centimeters thick. Here, too, powerful clamps have to be used to bend the plates around the ribs. The ribs also have lines on them showing where the planks go, and they have to be attached with millimeter precision. The planks are attached using nails of up to 350 millimeters long. 2 nails are used for each plank. The heads of the nails are wound with tarred bindings to ensure the hull is waterproof. Compressed air machines are used to drive in the nails. A lot of pine trees are needed to make the ship's masts. The trees are around 55 to 60 centimeters in diameter and 16 to 17 meters tall. All the timber used in the ship is felled in the wintertime to ensure it contains as little water as possible. As soon as the logs are transported to the shipyard, Terra Nova, the masts must be immediately sawn using a special chainsaw, which is pulled on a rail. The ship has 3 masts, and the biggest is made from several trees to ensure sufficient diameter. The various parts of the mast are sawn into rounded sections, which fit around a core in the center of the mast. The sections are left to dry, and once dry, they are ready to be joined to the mast. The mast sections are held together by notches in each one. The sections are also oiled to prevent splitting. After the parts are oiled, they are treated with a type of red lead to give protection from rust. Here we see parts of the bowsprit which will be joined around the middle piece. The 7 different parts are over 16 meters long. They are joined together with a millimeter precision and totally without glue. Here is the bowsprit, more or less completed, in the ship's hull. The vessel has 3 lower masts and a bowsprit. Over the masts are a number of poles and yards, which together make up the ship's rigging. Large quantities of lumber, in total over hundreds of pines and spruce, have been harvested so that the masts, bowsprit, poles, small poles, and yards can be raised. The masts, bowsprit, and poles are made of pine. The yards and small poles are made of spruce. 40 gigantic pines, which were 60 centimeters in diameter and 20 meters long, were needed for just 2 of the large masts. When parts of the rigging are completed, they are transported to the rigging workshop. There, all of the yards and masts are attired with their respective blocks and slings. Different parts must be joined together to form the lower mast. For this, a 700-degree oven is used. Now we must hurry. Quick! Attach the iron and drive it up to the correct position before it cools and gets stuck. The mast is coated with mutton sweat, which catches on fire. With plenty of time to spare, the iron is cooled before it can damage the mast. All in all, the ship will have around 2,000 square meters of sails, as well as reserve sails, hammocks, and covers. All of the linen sails are stitched by hand and come from England. Some of the sails are gigantic. The main topsail, for example, is 250 square meters. In this sail alone, there are over 87,000 stitches. When the double planking of oaks is in place, bolts will be driven through the hull. The bolts will then be nailed from the inside. To strengthen the hull, more than 200 forged steel knees are used. The purpose of these are to bind the decks and the hull together. On the upper decks, we are using wooden oak knees made from crooked oaks in exactly the same way as was done in the 1700s. In the carpentry workshop, the different parts that were earlier formed to the ship are sawed. For an elbow joint of wood to be strong enough, it must be grown naturally. Here is an oak with strong roots that will contribute to the building of the ship. With the help of patterns and a motor saw, the elbow joint is sculptured from the root. After many hours of hard work, here we see a natural wooden elbow joint that is waiting to be bolted to the ship. The bolted elbow joint joins the side of the ship with a stern plank to create an impressive strength. After this, the deck is strengthened for the mast and the mast clamps. 700 pine trees were harvested for the lumber in the 3 decks. After the decks are laid, begins the caulking, where clubs and iron are used to drive oakum, or lightly tarred fibers, into the deck seams. Even the hull is caulked before it is coated with boiling tar. Caulking and tarring are done to ensure that the ship is watertight. In the mast workshop, the 4-ton rudder of oak logs is joined together. The enormous mounting for the rudder is joined to the stern post and the rudder. Between the 11th and 12th frame, the passways for the propeller shafts are drilled. Inside the ship, the two 16-liter engines will be placed. In what used to be the cargo hold, there should be room for 36,000 liters of diesel oil and 20,000 liters of fresh water. In total, there will be 8 tanks made out of stainless steel on board. A modern CAD system was used in the complex construction work. With this system, it is possible to create a picture of the ship's hull, and these drawings are also used to produce the ship's drawings. If you could remove the planking from the hull, you would see that the hull is filled with modern equipment. This machinery is mainly there to give the crew a secure environment to work, and is also needed to fulfill the safety regulations of a modern ship classified for ocean traffic. For example, there are 5 waterproof bulkheads inside the hull, as well as modern sprinkler and sewage systems. This example illustrates the differences between the new and the historical ship. This fact also gives you an idea of the challenge that the engineers of the project have faced. They have to fit more than 40 modern systems into a hull shaped for sailing in the 18th century. There are, for example, systems for propulsion, fire, sanitation, and power supply. Furthermore, these systems are not to be visible from the outside and are not allowed to interfere with the ship's sailing ability. The two lower decks will therefore be of modern construction, and the two upper decks will be copies of the 18th century vessel. Now it is June in the year 2003. After 10 years of hard work, it is finally time to launch the ship. The ship is painted and ready to glide out of the shipbuilding hall and down into the waters of the Göta River. The wall of the shipbuilding hall has been dismantled, and everyone is working frantically to prepare for the launch. Here, one of the keel bracings is taken away. The last sandbike is emptied of sand, and the whole weight of the ship is now resting on the launch pads. The last of the barriers are taken away, and with great rejoicing, the East Indiaman glides majestically down into the river. This is a very happy day for the shipbuilders and for the crew on board. For the first time, the East India Company flag is hoisted and blows proudly from the stern. The rigging and final work on the ship begin immediately after the launch and celebration. Here, the 9-ton mast is raised with the help of a crane. Now the question arises, will the mast fit? Is the angle through the deck correct? With the help of a type of shoehorn, the mast is carefully lowered in the ship through all of the decks to see if it fits. Down in the ship, the Minister of Trade places an historical coin in the foot of the mast.
har klart att åka upp.
The maintenance of material that must resist water and the sun for many years must begin immediately. Wood tar, and again, wood tar is the answer. Strong lashings are laid around the bowsprit. They will prevent the bowsprit from lifting when the forestays strain, pull, and drag due to wind and rough seas. The ropes that are seen here are for taking up slack from the side and are called shrouds. The deck is incomplete. It is still missing the cabins, berths, and other furnishings and fittings. When complete, the ship will comply with all of the strict safety requirements that are obligatory for all large ships. It is not only on the outside that work is done. Work with furnishings, the mechanical systems, and pipes are at full speed. Now it is the spring of 2004. All three masts are in place. To protect the ship from the weather, it is covered with a tarp. But the work continues under the tarp. The first leg of the maiden voyage will follow the exact route of its ancestors from the 18th century. From her home harbor in Gothenburg, she will sail north of Great Britain to Cadiz in Spain. During the second leg, the ship will follow the winds surrounding the constant high pressures of the Atlantic Sea. This will take her close to the coast of Brazil, and therefore, we will make an extra stop in Recife, Brazil. After that, she will head across the Atlantic Sea towards South Africa and Cape Town. Here, the entire crew will be replaced. From South Africa, the ship will sail eastbound with the 38th parallel. This route will take her on the long journey to her next stop, Fremantle, in Australia. Thereafter, she heads for Jakarta in Indonesia. Here she will, just as her predecessors, stop for fresh supplies before the last leg of the journey. The final leg of the outbound journey is the short leg through the South China Sea to Canton, China, which is the historic destination of the ship.